elderly woman was abandoned by her daughter in the sewer. But what she found there, Martha Harrison never imagined that at 72 years old, her own daughter would be capable of such cruelty. What started as yet another argument about her independence ended in the worst possible way, with her falling into the dark and damp city sewer system. It was during that Tuesday afternoon that everything changed forever. Heather had come home with that determined look Martha knew all too well. It was the same look as when she decided her mother could no longer drive, the same as when she sold the antique furniture without asking, the same as when she started talking about nursing homes. "Mum, we need to have a serious talk about your future," said Heather, sitting down in the living room armchair with a folder full of papers. "What future, Heather? I'm just fine here in my house," replied Martha, continuing to fold the clothes she had taken down from the clothesline. "You're not fine at all. Yesterday you left the stove on. Last week you got lost coming back from the market. I've already talked with Dr. Harold, and he agrees that the assisted living facility is the best option." Martha stopped folding the clothes and stared at her daughter, 45 years old, and Heather still hadn't learned to talk things through instead of just deciding. "I'm not leaving my house. This house holds 50 years of my life, Heather. Here I raised you, took care of your father until his last day, and this is where I'm staying. You don't have a choice, Mum. I've already signed the papers, and on Monday they're coming to pick you up." That was when something inside Martha broke. 50 years devoted to that family, and now she was being discarded like an old piece of furniture. "How dare you!" she shouted, getting up from the chair with a strength she didn't know she still had. "This is my house." "Not anymore, it's not," Heather screamed back. "I've already transferred everything to my name. The house is going to be sold to pay for your expenses at the nursing home." "You did what?" "You're sick, Mum. You can't handle anything anymore. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life taking care of a senile old woman." The words cut like a razor. Martha felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Everything she had fought for, everything she had built, was being taken away from her by her own daughter. "Heather, I'm not sick, I just—" "Stop it." Heather stood up abruptly, knocking some papers to the floor. "I can't take it anymore. Every day it's something. Every day you call me complaining, asking for help, making a drama. I have my own life, my own problems, my own kids to raise. I never asked you to give up your life for me." "Oh no? And who do you call when the faucet breaks? And when you need to go to the doctor? And when you feel lonely and call 10 times a day?" Martha was silent for a moment. It was true that she depended on her daughter for many things, but it wasn't out of malice. It was because she had devoted herself so much to her family that she had never learned to handle certain practical parts of life. "I can learn, Heather. I can get a caretaker to help me." "With what money, Mom? Your Social Security benefits barely cover the house bills, and I don't have any extra cash to pay for luxuries." "Luxuries? You're calling it a luxury for me to want to stay in my own house?" The argument kept escalating, with shouts and accusations from both sides. Martha found herself saying things she had never said before, and Heather responding with a cruelty that seemed to come from years of pent-up resentment. It was when they walked out of the house, still yelling at each other, that the accident happened. They were on the sidewalk in front of the gate, and Martha didn't notice that the water and sewer department had left a manhole open after the morning's maintenance work. The signage was poorly positioned, nearly invisible in the late afternoon. "I'm not leaving my house," Martha screamed, stepping backward during the argument. "Yes, you are." "It's no use throwing a childish tantrum," replied Heather, also moving without paying attention to her surroundings. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Heather made a sudden motion with her hands, pushing at the air dramatically while shouting. Martha, trying to back away, missed her step and felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The scream she let out echoed through the tunnels as she fell, hitting the concrete walls before landing in the muddy bottom of the sewer system. The pain in her ankle was immediate and intense. From up above, she heard Heather's voice. "Mum, Mum, are you okay?" Martha tried to respond, but her voice came out too weak. She heard footsteps running on the surface, and then more voices. People were gathering, trying to help. "Does anyone have a rope?" someone yelled. "Did they call the fire department?" another voice asked. Martha tried to stand up, but the pain in her ankle was unbearable. She was wet, dirty, and completely disoriented. The daylight coming through the manhole was faint, and she could barely see anything around her. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, go ahead and hit that like button and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now continuing. "Mum, hang in there, help is on the way," Heather shouted from above. But as the minutes passed, Martha began to realize the rescue wouldn't be as simple as she'd imagined. The manhole was deep, and accessing the tunnels was complicated. She heard conversations about special equipment, about the need to call a technical team from the city. The dirty sewer water had a strong smell, and Martha felt disgusted, realizing she was sitting in mud she didn't even want to imagine the composition of. Her clothes were completely soaked, and she started feeling cold. "Heather!" she tried to shout, but her voice didn't have enough strength to reach the surface. With great effort, she managed to drag herself to a slightly higher part of the tunnel where there was less water. It was then that her hand touched something strange on the concrete wall. There seemed to be an opening, as if part of the wall had collapsed. Curious, and with little else to do while waiting for help, Martha carefully felt the opening. Her hands found what seemed to be an empty space behind the wall. She tried sticking her arm into the opening and felt her fingers touch something metallic. With difficulty, she managed to pull the object out. It was heavy and cold, and when she brought it close to her face in the faint light, she saw it shimmered differently. It looked golden. Martha rubbed the object on her wet shirt, trying to clean off the dirt. The more she cleaned it, the more convinced she became that it was real gold. It was a coin, quite old from what she could tell, with symbols she didn't recognize. Excited by the discovery, she stuck her hand back into the opening and found more coins. There were several, all similar, heavy and cold. She tucked some into her shirt, tying the fabric to make an improvised bundle. From above she kept hearing voices, but now they seemed more distant. Someone was explaining that the rescue would be more complicated than they'd thought, that they'd need special equipment that wouldn't arrive until the next day. "What do you mean, tomorrow?" she heard Heather's agitated voice. "My mother is down there." "Mom, we understand your concern, but it's a safety issue. The tunnel could collapse if we try a rescue without the proper equipment. She's in a relatively safe spot, and first thing tomorrow, we'll be here with everything we need." Martha felt a knot in her chest. She would have to spend the whole night down there alone in the dark and cold, but at the same time, there was something almost poetic about the situation. She had been literally thrown underground by her own daughter, and now she had found a treasure. Was it a sign? Was the universe trying to tell her something? During the hours that followed, Martha explored what she could of the tunnel she was in. It was old, clearly built decades before the modern sewer systems. The walls had exposed bricks in some places, and she realized this was no ordinary tunnel. Searching for more coins, she found pieces of rotten wood, remnants of what seemed to be old furniture, and even soaked papers that were completely illegible. It was as if someone had hidden things there a long time ago. The night was long and terrible. Martha couldn't sleep, both from the pain in her ankle and the cold and discomfort. She kept thinking about everything that had happened, the argument with Heather, the cruel words that had been said. But she also kept thinking about the coins. If they were real gold, as she suspected, they could be worth a lot of money. Maybe enough to change her situation completely. When dawn came, she heard movement up above. New voices, equipment being set up, and finally the voice of a firefighter calling out to her. "Mrs. Martha, can you hear me?" "I'm here," she shouted, with all the strength she could muster. The rescue took a few more hours. They lowered equipment, set up a pulley system, and finally managed to bring her back to the surface. Martha was unrecognizable, covered in mud and grime, but alive and strangely determined. Heather was waiting, her eyes red from crying. "Mum, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It was an accident." "I know, sweetie," Martha replied, hugging her daughter despite all the dirt. "I know." But deep down, Martha wasn't sure if it really had been an accident. The harsh words Heather had said still echoed in her ears, and now she had something her daughter didn't know existed. At the hospital, while they treated her sprained ankle and a few scrapes, Martha carefully hid the coins she had found. No one knew she had anything, and she wanted to keep it a secret until she found out exactly what she had discovered. The doctor said she would need to stay under observation for a few days, but there was nothing serious. Heather stayed by the bedside, clearly feeling guilty about what had happened. "Mum, about that conversation yesterday. Maybe I was too hasty. Maybe we can find another solution." "What kind of solution?" "I don't know, maybe a caregiver who stays with you during the day, or maybe I can come by the house more often." Martha looked at her daughter with a mix of affection and distrust. It was good to hear that Heather was reconsidering, but she knew that when the guilt faded, they would probably end up back at the same problem. "Let's talk about it when I get out of here," Martha said. "For now, I just want to rest." That night, alone in the hospital room, Martha examined the coins she had found more closely. There were 4 in total, all very heavy and with inscriptions she couldn't fully decipher. One of them had a date that seemed to be 1876, but it was hard to read. She remembered a TV show she sometimes watched about antiques and rare items. People would bring old things to experts for appraisal, and sometimes they'd discover they had real fortunes hidden at home. Could her coins be valuable? And if they were, how much could they be worth? The next morning, when the nurse brought breakfast, Martha asked to tune into the channel that aired the antiques show. Luckily, it was just the time it was on. On the show, a man had brought coins very similar to the ones she had found. The expert explained they were gold coins from a specific period in United States history, and each one could be worth thousands of dollars, depending on the condition. Martha nearly choked on her coffee. Thousands of dollars? And she had 4 coins. She spent the rest of the day thinking about what to do with this information. She couldn't just show up with the coins without explaining where she had found them. And if she told the truth, maybe other people would want to explore the tunnel where she had been. But there was something even more worrying. If the coins were there, maybe there were many more things hidden in that place. Maybe she had only found a small part of a larger treasure. When she was discharged on the 3rd day, Martha was determined to go back to the place where she had fallen. But it wouldn't be easy. The manhole had been closed again, and there would be people watching the area. Heather took her back home and stayed for a few hours, tidying things up and preparing food. "Mom, I was thinking, how about I bring the kids over for lunch on Sunday? It's been a while since we've done that." "That would be great, honey," Martha replied, but her mind was elsewhere. When Heather finally left, promising to come back the next day, Martha was alone with her plans. She waited until the early hours of the morning and, ignoring the pain in her ankle, dressed in dark clothes and left the house. The manhole was only 2 blocks away, on a street that was busy during the day, but completely deserted at night. When she got to the spot, she saw they had placed a heavy iron lid over the opening. Martha looked around, making sure she was alone. With great effort, she managed to move the lid just enough to create an opening she could slip through. Before going down, she tied a rope she had brought from home to a nearby pole. Going down was harder the second time, because now she knew what she was doing and was more scared. But the possibility of finding more treasures gave her the courage to keep going. At the bottom of the tunnel, she used a small flashlight she had brought to explore the area better. That's when she discovered the opening in the wall was much larger than she had noticed the first time. Crawling through the hole, Martha found a cavity that seemed to have been purposefully dug. And inside, protected by an old oilcloth, were more coins, many more. There were also other objects, jewelry, antique watches, and even some papers that, though damaged by time, still had part of the text legible. They appeared to be property documents, receipts, and personal letters. Martha filled a bag with everything she could carry and climbed back up to the surface. Her heart was beating so hard she was afraid she might get sick. She was carrying a fortune, and no one knew. Back home, she spread everything out on the kitchen table and tried to organize what she had found. The coins were many, all the watches seemed old and expensive, and the jewelry, even dirty and stained by time, clearly had value. In the legible papers, she was able to read the name Silas Grant Harrison several times, and a date that seemed to be from 1953. There were also references to a family farm and something about hard times, and protecting the estate. Martha began to understand what she had found. Someone decades ago had hidden the family's assets in that tunnel, probably during some period of instability or financial difficulty, and had never come back to get them. Now she was faced with a moral dilemma. Those things weren't technically hers. They belonged to a family that maybe didn't even know they still existed, but at the same time, they had been abandoned for over 50 years, and she had found them by chance after having been literally thrown in there. She spent the following days discreetly researching the Harrison family and the history of the neighborhood. At the public library, she discovered that there had indeed been a wealthy family with that name in the area, but that they had moved to another state in the 1950s after financial troubles. The librarian, a woman named Rosemary, noticed Martha's interest in the local historical records. "Are you researching family history?" Rosemary asked. "Something like that," Martha replied without going into details. "It's fascinating how some families just vanished from the area without a trace. The Harrisons, for example, owned half the land around here. Suddenly they sold everything in a hurry and disappeared." "Do you know what happened?" "Trouble with creditors, from what they say. The patriarch made some bad investments, and when the banks came calling, they lost everything. They say they fled overnight." Martha felt a strange relief. If the family had fled because of debt problems, it meant those belongings were probably lost anyway. Maybe she was just putting that treasure back into circulation. But there was still the practical problem of how to turn those objects into cash without raising suspicion. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit the like button and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us beginners. Now back to it. That's when she remembered her neighbor, Mr. Arthur, who worked with antique items. He had a small shop downtown where he bought and sold furniture, jewelry, and other antiques. The next day, Martha set aside just 2 coins and a watch and went to Mr. Arthur's shop. She wanted to test the waters before committing to anything bigger. "Mr. Arthur, good afternoon. I wanted you to take a look at some things I found at home. They were my mother's. She passed away years ago, and I never knew if they were worth anything." Mr. Arthur, a man in his 60s, picked up a magnifying glass and carefully examined the items. "Mrs. Martha, do you have any idea what you're carrying here?" he asked, wide-eyed. "Are they valuable?" "Valuable is an understatement. These coins are pure gold from a very rare series. And this watch, it's a Swiss brand that no longer exists. Just this here is worth a lot of money." "How much is a lot of money, Mr. Arthur?" "Well, I'd have to research more to give you an exact value, but just these 2 coins should be worth about $15,000 each, and the watch could reach $20,000 if it's working." Martha had to steady herself on the table to keep from falling. Those were just 3 items, and they already added up to over $50,000, and she had much, much more at home. "Would you like to sell?" "I haven't decided yet, Mr. Arthur. I want to think it over a bit more. But thank you for the appraisal." Leaving the shop, Martha was completely stunned. She had a fortune hidden at home and no one knew. For the first time in months, she felt truly independent. But when she got home, she found Heather waiting in the living room with a worried expression. "Mom, where were you? I got here and no one was home. I was worried." "I went out to take care of some things, sweetheart. I didn't know you were coming today." "What things? You can barely walk right with that ankle." Martha realized she would have to be more careful. Heather was clearly suspicious, probably still feeling guilty about the accident and wanting to keep a close watch. "I went to the library to look up some recipes, and then I stopped by the pharmacy. You could have called me. I would have brought you whatever you needed." "Heather, I need to get out of the house sometimes. I can't be locked up here like a prisoner." Her daughter sighed, clearly exasperated. "It's not that, Mom. It's that after what happened?" "After what you made happen, you mean?" The words came out before Martha could stop herself. Heather turned pale. "Mom, I've apologized 1,000 times. It was an accident." "Was it?" "Because I remember you shouting that you couldn't stand taking care of me anymore. I was upset. I said things I shouldn't have. But I would never push you on purpose." Martha looked into her daughter's eyes and saw something that made her uneasy. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Heather probably hadn't planned to push her, but in the heat of anger, she might not have cared much about what would happen. "It's fine, Heather. Let's forget it." But I need my independence. I can't live being watched all the time. I'm not watching you, Mom. I'm taking care of you. It's the same thing, from my point of view. Her daughter stayed home for another hour, tidying up things that didn't need tidying and asking questions about Martha's routine. It was clear she was looking for signs that her mother couldn't take care of herself. When Heather finally left, Martha locked herself in her room and picked up one of the letters she had found in the tunnel. Patiently, she managed to decipher part of the text. "Silas, things are getting tough here. The creditors are threatening to take everything. I've already hidden what I could in the place we agreed on. If something happens to us, at least the next generations will have something." The letter was signed by someone named Abigail and dated September 1953. Martha understood that this family had indeed faced serious difficulties and that someone had had the foresight to hide some of the assets for protection. The problem was that, apparently, they never managed to come back to retrieve them. She decided to do a deeper search at the library. The next day, she went back there and asked Rosemary for help finding more information about the Harrison family. "Mrs. Harrison, can I ask why you're so interested in this particular family?" Martha hesitated for a moment. Rosemary seemed like a trustworthy person, and she might need an ally to handle the whole situation. "Rosemary, if I tell you something, do you promise to keep it a secret?" "Of course, go ahead. When I fell into that manhole last week, I found some things that belonged to this family, things that had been hidden for decades." "What kind of things?" "Valuable items, very valuable." Rosemary's eyes widened. "Are you talking about a treasure?" "That's one way to put it." "My God, Mrs. Harrison, that changes everything, doesn't it?" "How so?" "Well, you were practically being forced out of your home, and now you find something that could solve all your money problems. It's almost like a miracle." Martha hadn't thought of it that way, but it was true. She had been literally thrown into the trash by her own daughter, and had found something that could give her complete independence. "Rosemary, do you think I'm doing something wrong by keeping these things?" "Mrs. Harrison, that family abandoned everything and disappeared over 50 years ago. If they wanted to recover the goods, they would have come back to look. The fact that you found them by accident, after everything you've been through, seems like a sign to me that it was meant to be." "You really think so?" "I do. And more than that, I think you deserve this opportunity. After a lifetime of taking care of the family, you suddenly find yourself being treated like a burden. Now you have a chance to show that you can still take care of yourself." The conversation with Rosemary gave Martha a new perspective. She began to see the discovery not as something she was stealing, but as an opportunity that life had given her to start over. In the following days, she went back to the tunnel 2 more times, always in the early hours of the morning. There were many more things hidden than she had initially imagined. Besides the coins and jewelry, she found documents showing that the Harrison family had been even richer than she thought. There were property deeds, stock certificates from companies that no longer existed, and even a few small gold bars, carefully wrapped in waxed cloth. Martha calculated that, in total, she had found the equivalent of at least $500,000 in today's value. It was a fortune that would completely change her life. But it also brought new problems. How would she explain her sudden financial independence? How would she sell the items without raising suspicion? And most importantly, how would she deal with Heather, who would certainly notice changes in her mother's standard of living? The first step was to talk again with Mr. Arthur. This time she brought more items and got straight to the point. "Mr. Arthur, I have a proposal for you. I have a lot more things like the ones I brought the other day, but I need to sell them discreetly." "Martha, can I ask where so many antiques came from?" Martha had prepared a story. "They were from my Aunt Gladys, who lived out in the countryside. She passed away recently and left everything to me. But my daughter doesn't know, and I prefer to keep it that way for now. It's family matters, you understand." Mr. Arthur nodded. He had dealt with complicated families for years and knew that handling inheritances and relatives wasn't always simple. "I can do business with you, Martha, but it would have to be little by little so as not to draw attention, and I'd take a percentage for the brokerage." "How much would that percentage be?" 20%. It's the market standard." Martha accepted. Even losing 20%, she would still be left with enough to change her life completely. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Martha would bring a few items at a time to Mr. Arthur, who would sell them to collectors and other antique dealers. The money was deposited into a new account she opened at another bank, far from where Heather could discover it. But her daughter was becoming increasingly suspicious. Martha had bought slightly better clothes, was eating better, and seemed more confident and independent. "Mom, you seem different," Heather said during a visit. "Different how?" I don't know, more cheerful. And these new clothes, where did they come from?" "I found some good sales at the store downtown." "With what money, Mum? Your Social Security benefits barely cover expenses." "I saved a little over the past few months." Heather didn't seem convinced, but she didn't press the issue. At least not at that moment. The problem was that she started visiting more often, always with excuses to look around the house and check on her mother's things. Martha realized she was being investigated. That's when she decided to speed up her plans. With the money she had already saved, she could start thinking about more concrete alternatives for her situation. The first thing she did was look for a lawyer to better understand her rights regarding the house. She found out that Heather had used a power of attorney document that Martha had signed years ago when her husband was sick to transfer the property. "Martha, this transfer can be legally challenged," explained the lawyer, Mr. Marshall. "You signed this power of attorney under specific circumstances, and it was used for different purposes. Does that mean I can get my house back?" "It's possible, but it would be a long and costly process, and you would have to prove that you were coerced or deceived. And if I don't want to get into a fight with my daughter, what other options do I have? You could buy a new property. With financial independence, you wouldn't need to depend on anyone." The idea of buying her own house, far from all that family turmoil, began to take shape in Martha's mind. She started looking for small apartments in other areas of the city. It was during one of these visits that she met Mrs. Nellie, a 75-year-old widow who was selling her apartment to move closer to her children. "Why are you moving, Mrs. Nellie?" "Oh, my dear, it's just that my children think I can't live alone anymore. They want me to move near them, into a senior housing complex." "And do you want to go?" "To be honest, not really. I like my independence, but they've been insisting so much that I ended up agreeing." Martha saw an opportunity. "Mrs. Nellie, what if you didn't sell the apartment, but rented it to me instead? That way you'd keep the property, have some extra income, and if you ever wanted to come back, you could." "Interesting. But can you afford the rent?" "Yes, I can, and I can pay in advance if you prefer." The deal was closed quickly. Martha paid 6 months' rent up front and a security deposit too, all with the money she'd been getting from selling the antiques. The apartment was small but comfortable, in a quiet neighborhood with good public transportation. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a utility area. It was perfect for someone alone who wanted to start her life over, but there was still the problem of how to leave the current house without sparking a war with Heather. Martha decided to do it gradually. She started by taking some clothes and personal items to the new apartment, always when her daughter wasn't around. She also kept up her nightly visits to the tunnel. She had found more things, including a small collection of gemstones stored in a metal box. Apparently, the Harrison family had been even wealthier than the early documents suggested. During one of these visits, however, Martha got a scare. As she was climbing back up to the surface, she heard voices approaching. She quickly closed the manhole cover and hid behind some parked cars. There were 2 men talking in low voices. "I'm sure someone's been messing around here," one of them said. "The cover was half open yesterday." "Could just be vandalism," the other replied. "But let's keep an eye on it. If someone's looking for a place to hide or do drugs, we have to report it to the city." Martha waited until they moved away before leaving her hiding spot. She realized her nightly activities had been noticed, and she'd have to be even more careful, or stop altogether. She decided she had already recovered enough of the treasure. She had more than enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life, and continuing to take risks could ruin everything. The following week, she finished moving into the new apartment. She only took her clothes and most important personal belongings, leaving the furniture and other items in the old house. When Heather found out her mother had moved, her reaction was explosive. "What do you mean you moved without telling me?" she shouted over the phone. "Heather, I am a grown adult. I can make my own decisions." "But how? With what money? You can't afford rent." "Yes, I can. I got a loan using my Social Security as collateral. It was a lie, but Martha couldn't tell the truth." "What madness is this, Mom? You're going into debt, and in the end, you'll still have to come live with me." "No, I won't, Heather. I'm just fine here." "Where is this apartment? I'm coming over right now." Martha gave the address, knowing it was pointless to try to hide it. Heather arrived an hour later, clearly furious. "Mum, what kind of place is this? You don't even know if the neighborhood is safe or if—" "Heather, stop! The apartment is great, the neighborhood is quiet, and I'm happy here." "Happy? You're delusional. This is all very strange. Where did the money come from? And don't give me that loan story, because I know how much you get." Martha looked at her daughter with a mix of sadness and determination. "Heather, sit down. We need to talk seriously." "I'm listening." "You pushed me down that manhole because you said you couldn't stand taking care of me anymore, remember?" "Mom, I already explained it was an accident." "Let me finish. You said I was a burden, that I was getting in the way of your life. Well, now I'm not anymore. I'm living on my own, supporting myself, and I don't need anything from you." "That's impossible. You don't have enough money." "Yes, I do. And if you want to stay in touch with me, you're going to have to accept that I'm independent. If you don't want to, that's your problem. I already raised you. I did my duty as a mother. Now I want to live my own life." Heather was silent for a few minutes, clearly processing what her mother was saying. "Where did this money come from, Mum? This all seems very suspicious." "Heather, there are things you don't know about me. There always have been. I had a life before you were born, and I have a life that doesn't revolve around you." "What things?" "That's none of your business. What matters is that I'm fine, I'm safe, and I'm happy. If you want to be a part of my life, you'll be welcome. But as a visitor, not as a supervisor." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Heather left the apartment visibly shaken. Martha knew her daughter wouldn't give up easily, and that she'd probably try to find out where the money came from. But she felt stronger and more confident than she had in years. In the following months, Martha organized her new life. She bought simple but comfortable furniture, decorated the apartment her way, and established a routine that included walks in the park, visits to the library, and crochet classes at a nearby community center. Rosemary became a close friend. Martha told her the whole truth about the treasure, and the librarian became her confidant and advisor. "Mrs. Martha, you're unrecognizable," said Rosemary during one of their conversations. "You look 10 years younger." "It's because for the first time in my life I'm living for myself," Martha replied. "I always lived for my husband, for my daughter, for the family. Now I've discovered I can live for me." "And Heather? How are things with her?" "Complicated. She can't accept that I'm independent. She keeps investigating my life, asking questions about money. Last week she even hired a private detective to follow me." "A detective? That's absurd." "Yes. I noticed because the same man started showing up in several places I went. When I confronted Heather, she confessed. And what did you do?" "I talked to the detective directly. I explained that I'm a fully competent adult and that I wasn't doing anything illegal. He stopped following me, but Heather's pressure kept increasing. She'd show up at the apartment unannounced, ask intrusive questions to the neighbors, and even tried to convince Mrs. Nellie to break the lease. That's when Martha decided to take a more drastic step. With some of the money she still had, she bought a small apartment in another neighborhood, this time in her own name. It would be her plan B in case the situation with Heather became unbearable. But before she could put the plan into action, something unexpected happened. During one of her walks in the park, Martha was approached by a disheveled-looking man who was clearly living on the streets. "Ma'am, can I talk to you for a minute?" Martha was on guard, but the man didn't seem threatening. "What do you want?" Hey, it's just that I saw you coming out of that manhole a few times during the night. I live around here under the bridge. I know it's none of my business, but I got curious. Martha's heart raced. Someone had seen her nighttime visits. I don't know what you're talking about. Ma'am, no offense, but you don't seem like the type to go into the sewers for fun. If you found something down there, I won't tell anyone. I just wanted to know if there's anything left. Martha looked at the man more carefully. He must have been around 50, clearly malnourished and wearing dirty clothes, but his eyes lacked the aggression or malice she would have expected from someone trying to blackmail her. What's your name? Caleb, ma'am. Caleb Walker. Caleb, what exactly do you want? Look, ma'am, I don't have a place to sleep. Most days I don't have anything to eat. If you found some treasure down there, I'm not asking for half or anything like that. I just wanted a little help to get a small room, maybe a job. Martha studied Caleb's face. There was something honest in his approach, a humility that touched her. Caleb, why do you live on the streets? Ma'am, it's a long story. I lost my job a few years back, couldn't pay the rent. My family turned their backs on me. One thing led to another, and I ended up on the streets. I've tried to start over many times, but it's hard to get a job without an address, and hard to get an address without a job. Do you have any addictions, drink a lot, use drugs? No, ma'am, sometimes I have a beer when I get some money, but nothing excessive. Never used drugs. Martha made an impulsive decision. Caleb, I'm going to make you an offer. I need someone to take care of an apartment I bought. It'd be like a building superintendent, but living on site. You'd have a salary, a place to sleep, and a chance to start over. Would you be up for it? Are you serious, ma'am? I am. But there's one condition. You can't tell anyone about seeing me come out of that manhole. It's a secret between us. Deal, ma'am, whatever you say. Martha gave him the address of the apartment she had bought and arranged to meet Caleb the next day. It would be a risky experiment, but she had a good feeling about that man. At their next meeting, Caleb showed up clean and in washed clothes. Martha showed him the apartment and explained what his responsibilities would be. It's small, but it's yours, she said. In return, you take care of the building, receive mail for me here, and be available if I need any help. Miss Martha, you're an angel. I swear you won't regret it. I hope not, Caleb. Everyone deserves a second chance. The arrangement worked out better than Martha had expected. Caleb proved to be responsible, careful with the apartment, and deeply grateful for the opportunity. Within a few weeks, he had found a part-time job at a hardware store. But the situation with Heather kept getting worse. Her daughter had discovered the second apartment and was furious. Mum, now 2 apartments? Where is all this money coming from? Heather, that's none of your business. Of course it's my business. You're my mother, and if you're involved in something illegal. Illegal? What illegality, Heather? I don't know. Money laundering, fencing stolen goods, I don't know. Elderly people get used for those things because no one suspects them. Martha looked at her daughter in disbelief. Do you really think your 72-year-old mother is involved with organized crime? I don't know what to think anymore, Mom. You were poor. You depended on me for everything, and suddenly you show up with money to buy apartments. And doesn't it occur to you that maybe I always had resources, but I just never told you? What resources? You always complained that your social security benefits were too little, because I wanted you to learn the value of things. But that doesn't mean I was actually poor. It was a lie, but Martha hoped it would be convincing. So you let me pay your bills, your medications, your doctors, knowing you had money saved up. I never asked you to pay for anything, Heather. You took on those responsibilities because you thought I couldn't take care of myself. That's dishonest, Mom. What's dishonest is pushing me down a manhole because you don't want to take care of your own mother. I did not push you, as you did too, and now you're mad because you found out you don't have to worry about me. The argument ended with Heather storming off, promising to find out the truth. Martha knew the situation was reaching a breaking point. That's when she got an unexpected visit. It was a man in his 50s, well-dressed, who introduced himself as a lawyer. Mrs. Martha, my name is Mr. Sterling Vance. I represent your daughter Heather Harrison Miller. What does she want now? Your daughter is worried about your mental and financial health. She asked me to look into the possibility of a guardianship proceeding. Martha felt the ground drop out from under her. Guardianship? Yes. When an elderly person shows behaviors that suggest an inability to manage their own assets, the family can ask the court to appoint a conservator to handle that person's interests. I'm not crazy. No one is saying you're crazy, Mrs. Martha, but your daughter claims there have been sudden and unexplained changes in your behavior and spending patterns. This could be a sign of dementia, or that someone is taking advantage of you. What's someone? Ill-intentioned people who take advantage of vulnerable seniors. They convince them to make bad investments, buy unnecessary things, or even transfer property. Martha realized the gravity of the situation. If Heather could prove she was being manipulated or had mental problems, she would lose all her independence. Mr. Sterling, I am in full mental capacity. I can prove it with medical exams, psychological evaluations, whatever it takes. That would be wise, but you would also have to explain where the money for the recent purchases came from. Why? Is it a crime to have money? No, but if the money came from a questionable source, or if someone is manipulating you into spending, that could justify a temporary conservatorship. Martha asked for time to think and talk to her own lawyer. Mr. Sterling left a business card and said he would return the following week. When she was alone, Martha panicked. Everything she had achieved could be lost because of her own daughter's distrust. And the worst part was that she couldn't tell the truth without incriminating herself. She decided to go see Mr. Marshall, the lawyer she had consulted before. Mr. Marshall, my daughter wants to have me declared incompetent. What can I do? Mrs. Martha, you can contest the proceedings, but you would have to show that you are in full mental capacity and that the money you have is legitimate. And if I can't prove where the money came from, then it gets complicated. The judge might decide there really is something suspicious going on. But Mr. Marshall, hypothetically speaking, if someone found a treasure that had been abandoned for decades, would that treasure legally belong to them? Mr. Marshall looked at Martha with interest. It's a complex situation. In theory, a treasure found on public property belongs to the state. But if it had been abandoned for over 50 years, with no known heirs claiming it, and if it was found by accident, well, it would be hard for anyone to contest. I see. Mrs. Martha, are you telling me that you found a treasure? Martha took a deep breath and told him the whole truth. Mr. Marshall listened in silence, taking notes. That's an incredible story, he said at the end, and technically you haven't done anything illegal. The problem is proving all that without incriminating yourself for trespassing on public property. What do you advise? Let's build a defense based on mental capacity. Let's do all the necessary exams to prove you're lucid. And as for the money, we'll claim it was an inheritance you kept secret for personal reasons. Will that work? It might. Especially if we can prove that her daughter has a financial interest in controlling her. The guardianship process was filed 2 weeks later. Martha had to undergo several medical and psychological evaluations, all confirming she was in perfect mental condition for her age. During the process, it was discovered that Heather had significant credit card and loan debts. This strengthened the argument that she might have a financial interest in controlling her mother's assets. It was also revealed that Heather had used her mother's power of attorney in questionable ways, transferring the house without Martha's full knowledge. This hurt her credibility before the judge. The process lasted 4 months, during which Martha lived in constant anxiety. But in the end, the judge ruled there weren't enough grounds to justify the guardianship. Heather was furious with the decision and decided to cut ties completely with her mother. You won this time, Mum, but don't think it's over. I'll find out where that money came from, and when I do, you'll be sorry. Heather, you're my daughter and I love you, but I won't take disrespect anymore. If you want to stay in touch, it'll be on my terms. If not, so be it. That was their last conversation for several months. During that time, Martha thrived. Freed from the constant pressure of her daughter, she was able to enjoy her new financial independence. She helped Caleb get fully set up, even paying for a vocational course for him. She also started helping other people. She met women in the same situation she had been in, pressured by their families, threatened with being institutionalized against their will, losing their autonomy. With that in mind, Martha had an idea. With part of the treasure money, she created a small, informal support program for elderly people in vulnerable situations. She rented small, cheap apartments and sublet them to people who needed independence. Rosemary helped her run the project. Within 6 months, they were helping 12 different people, some seniors fleeing controlling families, others who had lost their homes due to financial problems. "Miss Martha, you've created an amazing support network," Rosemary said during one of their meetings. "These people are getting a second chance at life." "That's exactly what I wanted, Rosemary. No one should be discarded just because they're getting old." The project grew organically. The people being helped started referring others who needed assistance, and before long Martha was coordinating a small mutual aid community. Caleb became her right-hand man in the project, helping with apartment repairs, mediating difficult conversations, and using his street smarts to identify people who really needed help. "Miss Martha, you saved my life," he said during one conversation. "Now I want to help save other people's lives." "Caleb, you don't owe me anything. You're doing this because of your own qualities." "I do owe you, Ma'am. You gave me a chance when I was just another invisible bum. Now I know what it's like to have dignity again." A year after the project started, Martha received an unexpected visit. It was Heather, but she looked different. She seemed thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, and her clothes weren't up to their usual standard. "Mom, can we talk?" "Of course, honey, come in." Heather sat down in the apartment's living room and stayed quiet for a few minutes. "Mom, I came to apologize." "For what, Heather?" "For everything. For pushing you. For trying to have you committed. For questioning your sanity. For filing that ridiculous lawsuit." "What happened to change your mind?" I lost my job, Mom, and my husband left me. He found out about the debts I was hiding and couldn't take it anymore. She took the kids and moved into his mother's house." Martha felt her heart tighten. No matter how hurt she was with her daughter, seeing her in pain still stung. "I'm so sorry, honey. I ended up with nowhere to live, Mom. I had to sell everything to pay off my creditors. And in the middle of all that, I started to understand how you felt when I threatened to have you committed." "What do you mean?" "My ex-husband and his family are trying to prove I'm an unfit mother so they can get custody of the kids. They're claiming I'm financially irresponsible, that I have behavioral issues. It's almost the same thing I tried to do to you." "And the kids?" "For now, they're with him. I can visit them once a week, always supervised. It's like I'm a criminal." Martha looked at her daughter and saw, perhaps for the first time, a vulnerable and frightened person instead of the controlling woman she had known in recent years. "Heather, are you working?" "I'm looking, but it's not easy. The job market is tough, and when they find out about my financial situation—" "Where are you living?" "In a boarding house downtown. It's not a very nice place." Martha thought for a few minutes. Part of her wanted to help her daughter immediately. Another part was cautious, remembering all the problems they had been through. "Heather, I can help you, but with conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you have to accept that I'm independent and capable of taking care of my own life. No trying to control me or question my decisions. I accept. Second, you have to go to therapy to understand why you became so controlling and aggressive. I accept. Third, if you ever find out where my money came from, you have to promise you won't try to harm me because of it." "Mom, I don't even want to know where your money came from anymore. I've learned that everyone has a right to their secrets." Martha offered to let Heather stay temporarily in the apartment where Caleb lived, a sort of family boarding house, until she got back on her feet. Caleb, who had become almost like a son to Martha, agreed to share the space without any problem. "Your daughter needs help, Mrs. Martha. Everyone deserves a second chance," he said. In the following months, Heather got a job at an accounting firm and began to rebuild her life. Living with people who had lost everything and were starting over made her appreciate the opportunities she had more. She also started helping with Martha's project, using her administrative skills to better organize the finances and contracts. "Mom, what you're doing here is incredible," she said one day. "Helping people who are in the same situation I was in, it's really noble." It's not nobility, Heather, it's humanity. It's remembering that we all might need a second chance someday. The mother-daughter relationship slowly rebuilt itself, now based on mutual respect instead of dependence. Heather learned to value her mother's independence, and Martha learned to forgive her daughter's mistakes. One day, Heather got joint custody of her kids back. It was a very emotional moment for the whole family. "Grandma Martha, can you take us to see where you live?" asked the youngest grandchild. "Of course, my love. Grandma has a lot of interesting things to show you." Martha took her grandchildren to see some of the apartments in the project, introduced them to Caleb and other people who were part of the community. The kids were fascinated by the stories of new beginnings and overcoming hardship. "Grandma, you're like a superhero," said the oldest granddaughter. "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" "Because you help people who lost everything to get a new home. It's like you give them superpowers." Martha smiled. She had never thought of herself as a hero, but maybe that's exactly what she was doing, giving superpowers to people society had discarded. That night, alone in her apartment, Martha reflected on everything that had happened in just over 2 years. She had been literally pushed to rock bottom by her own daughter, but down there she had found not just a material treasure, but a whole new way to live. She had learned that it's never too late to start over, that independence has no age, and that sometimes the hardest moments in life can turn into the greatest opportunities. She picked up one of the last gold coins she still kept as a souvenir and held it up to the light. It shone just as brightly as on the first day she had found it in the mud of the sewer. But now she knew the real treasure wasn't in the coins. It was in the freedom to be who she truly was, in the chance to help other people, and in the discovery that life can have new chapters even when it seems the story is over. Martha Harrison, at 74 years old, had found her true wealth. And it wasn't locked away in any safe. It was spread across every life she had managed to touch, every person she had helped to start over, every second chance she had offered to someone who had been discarded. The tunnel treasure had only been the beginning. The real treasure was the life she had built after discovering she was worth far more than anyone ever imagined. The end. So, what did you think of Mrs. Martha's story? Do you think she did the right thing by keeping the treasure she found? Let us know in the comments if you would do the same in her place. And don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories like this one.